Moscow is claiming to have secured key positions in Kharkiv, while Ukraine is desperately fighting back with limited resources as it waits for the Western weapons to reach the front lines. This desperate situation has sparked a fiery debate amongst Western allies. Is it time to rewrite the rules of engagement? Our next report explains.
Russian troops are locked in intense battles with Ukrainian soldiers around the embattled town of Vovchansk in northeast Ukraine. Moscow's renewed northeast offensive, launched late last week, is the most significant border insurgent since the full-scale invasion began. With Ukrainians on the back foot, Lithuania ignites a firestorm of debate. Lithuania's Foreign Minister, Gabrielius Landsbergis, asserts that crippling restrictions placed on Ukrainian use of Western weapons are hindering their ability to achieve strategic objectives. Lithuania, which is a NATO ally and shares a border with Russia, is seeking a bolder approach, allowing Ukraine to strike Russian territory, disrupt supply lines, and neutralize enemy forces poised to attack. This sentiment isn't isolated. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas echoes Landsbergis's call, advocating for Western military trainers to bolster Ukraine's forces. The big NATO partners, too, become more lenient in their tone and tenure on how Ukraine should use their long-range missiles.
We have not encouraged or enabled strikes outside of Ukraine, but ultimately Ukraine has to make decisions for itself about how it's going to conduct this war. A war it's conducting in defense of its freedom, of its sovereignty, of its territorial integrity.
Let's be absolutely clear, Russia has launched an attack into Ukraine, and Ukraine absolutely has the right to strike back at Russia.
Including inside Russia?
Well, that's a decision for Ukraine, and Ukraine has that right, just as Russia is striking inside Ukraine.
Kyiv, feeling the heat on the battlefield, is slamming the West's sluggish decision-making on military aid.
Had we received Patriots in the beginning when there were very few drones operational, when they were using missiles, and had they seen the missiles are being shot down, they would have understood that it was pointless to target energy infrastructure on a massive scale.
The present situation presents a chilling dilemma for the West. Should Ukraine be armed with more deadlier weapons to inflict more pain on Russia? Again, deploying Western troops directly on the ground is a recipe for disaster. A single misstep could spark a catastrophic escalation, a risk no one wants to take. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Joachim Bitterlich is the former German ambassador to NATO and former European diplomatic and security advisor to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Is now joining us live from Paris. Ambassador Bitterlich, welcome to the show. Big NATO partners, including some in the Baltic states, have become more lenient in their tone on how Ukraine should use their long-range missiles. How do you view NATO's role in the conflict this far?
Well, first of all, NATO is trying to avoid any direct conflict between NATO and Russia. This is one side. And the other side, when you look at the development of a conflict in the last weeks, there are really weaknesses of the Ukrainian air defense. You don't use Patriots against drones. You should use simpler weapons to attack against drones, but please not a Patriot. It's out of any cost if you want. It's too expensive if you want, but they do not have enough. And therefore the Ukrainians try to hit what we call in the military terms the hinterland of the Russian side by longer range missiles coming from Britain, coming from France. We have seen certain, even on Russian TV, they try to do this, but all this is not sufficient, what I call, with regard to the Russian quantity. And the Russians have learned in the last months in this conflict, and therefore they have opened a second front in the north. and they try to fight, let's say, with other means than only sophisticated ones.
Ambassador
Ukraine, yes, please.
Ambassador, sorry to cut you short, but Ambassador Bitterlich, there's a statement by David Cameron, the UK Foreign Secretary, who said that Ukraine has absolutely the right to strike back at Russia, even if it includes inside Russia. What do you make of that statement by this foreign minister?
It's a matter of fact, if you want, because the Ukrainians in the last months have done so. They have been striking oil refineries within Russia. They have been striking other points in Russia. They have been trying to strike on military airports, not only in Crimea, but in inner Russia. They have done so. The problem is the Ukrainians do not have enough weapons to do this in an efficient way. And there, what I call the West is asked to do more if they want to protect in an efficient way the Ukrainians.
Well, Ambassador Bitterlich, finally, in your view, should Ukraine be armed with more deadlier weapons to inflict more pain on Russia?
Well, it depends on what you mean by deadlier weapons. I know there is a certain German problem on the Taurus missiles. I know this, where Chancellor Scholz is refusing to act in this sense because he is thinking this is a weapon that could reach, at the end of the day, Moscow. And this would mean an escalation the Germans would not accept. And there are certain limits within allies or between allies, if you want. Some have been opening. Look at this strange debate we have had about delivery of tanks from the Western world. Tanks are not the decisive weapon. You need them as support for artillery. Yes, what the Ukrainians should have got much more is artillery and at the same time air defense, simpler air defense possibilities. And there the West should do much more than he has done in the past. And these two key weapons they need, and they need drones at the same time. This is true.
All right, I've been talking to Joachim Bitterlich. He's the former German ambassador to NATO and former European diplomatic and security advisor to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Ambassador, thank you for talking to us today.
A pleasure as always.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.